Okay, this is part 70 of Nos4a2. The lake. Vic closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, she was staring at the clock on the night table. 5:59. Then the celluloid flaps flipped over to 6 a.m. and the phone rang. The two things happened so closely together that Vic thought at first the alarm was going off, and she couldn't figure out why she had set it for so early in the morning. The phone rang again, and the bedroom door clicked open. Tabitha Hutter peered in on her, eyes bright behind her round spectacles. "It's a 603 number," she said. "A demolition company in Dover. You better not answer. It's probably not him, but—" "It's not him," Vic said, and fumbled for the phone. "I didn't hear until late," said her father, "and it took me a while to come up with your number. I waited as long as I could in case you were trying to sleep. How are you, kid?" Vic removed the phone from her mouth and said, "It's my dad." Tabitha Hutter said, "Tell him he's being recorded. All the calls to this number will be recorded for the foreseeable future." "Did you hear that, Chris?" "I did. It's okay. Anything they need to do." "Christ, it's good to hear your voice, kiddo." "What do you want?" "I want to know how you're doing. I want you to know I'm here if you need me." "First time for everything, huh?" He exhaled a thin, frustrated breath. "I understand what you're going through. I went through it too, once upon a time, you know. I love you, girl. Tell me if I can do anything." "You can't," she said. "There's nothing for you to blow up right now. It's all blown up. Don't call me anymore, Dad. I'm in enough pain already. You just make it worse." She hung up. Tabitha Hutter watched her from the doorway. "Did you get your cell phone experts to try and locate Wayne's phone? Was it any different from when you tried Find My iPhone? It can't have been. If you had any new information, you wouldn't have let me sleep." "They can't locate his phone." "They couldn't locate it, or they traced him to the St. Nick Parkway somewhere east of Christmasland." "Does that mean something to you? Charlie Mannix had a house in Colorado. The trees around the house were hung with Christmas ornaments. The press gave it a name, called it the Sleigh House. Is that Christmasland?" "No," Vic thought automatically, "because the Sleigh House is in our world. Christmasland is in Mannix's inscape. The Mannixscape." Hutter had a hell of a poker face watching Vic with an expression of studious calm. Vic thought if she told this woman that Christmasland was a place in the fourth dimension where dead children sang carols and made long-distance phone calls, that Hutter's expression wouldn't change at all. She would continue to give Vic that cool, clinical look while police held Vic down and a doctor sedated her. "I don't know where Christmasland is or what it is," Vic said, which was largely true. "I don't understand why that's coming up when you search for Wayne's phone. Do you want to look at hammers?" The house was still full of people, although they looked less cops now, more like the Geek Squad from Best Buy. 3 young men had set up laptops on the coffee table in the living room, a gangly Asian with tribal tattoos, a skinny kid with a red Jeffro, and roughly a billion freckles, and a black man in a black turtleneck that looked like it had been snatched from Steve Jobs' closet. The house smelled of coffee. There was a fresh pot brewing in the kitchen. Hutter poured Vic some and added cream and a spoonful of sugar just the way Vic took it. "Is that in my file?" Vic asked. "How I take my coffee?" "The cream was in the fridge. You must use it for something, and a coffee spoon was sitting in the sugar jar." "Elementary, my dear Watson," Vic said. "I used to go dressed as Holmes for Halloween," Hutter said. "I had the pipe and the deerstalker cap and all the rest. What about you? What did you wear for trick-or-treat?" "A straitjacket," Vic said. I'd go as an escaped mental patient. It was good practice for the rest of my life." Hutter's smile flattened and went away. She sat at the table with Vic and handed her the iPad. She explained how to swipe through the gallery to look at the different pictures of hammers. "Why does it matter what he hit me with?" Vic asked. "You don't know what that matters until after you've seen it, so you try to see everything." Vic swiped past sledgehammers, hardware store hammers, croquet mallets. "What the hell is this? A database dedicated to hammer murders?" "Yes." Vic glanced at her. Hutter's face had returned to its usual bland state of impassivity. Vic swiped through some more pictures, then paused. It was this one." Hutter looked at the screen. On it was a picture of a foot-long hammer with a rectangular stainless steel head and a crossed-hatched handle and a sharp hook curving from the end. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, because of the hook. That's the one. What the hell kind of hammer is that?" Hutter pulled her lower lip into her mouth, then pushed back her chair and stood up. Not one you buy at the hardware store. I have to make a call. She hesitated, one hand on the back of Vic's chair. Do you think you'd be up for making a statement to the press this afternoon? We've had good play on the cable news channels. It has a lot of angles. Everyone knows the search engine story, so there's that. I'm sorry to say that a lot of them are talking about this as a real life and death game of search engine. A personal appeal for help will keep the story active, and awareness is our best weapon. Has the press figured out that Mannix also kidnapped me when I was a teenager? Vic asked. Heather's brow furrowed, as in thought. No. They haven't worked that out yet, and I don't think you should mention it in your statement. It's important to keep the media focused on the information that matters. We need people on the lookout for your son and the car. That's what we talk about. Everything else is insignificant at best, a distraction at worst. The car, my son, and Mannix, Vic said. We want everyone on the lookout for Mannix. Yes, of course. She took 2 steps towards the door, then turned back and said, You've been wonderful, Victoria. You've been very strong in a scary time. You've done so much I hate to ask for more, but when you're ready, we'll need to sit down today and I have to get the whole story in your words. I need to know more about what Mannix did to you. It could greatly enhance our chances of finding your son. I already told you what he did to me. I gave you the whole story yesterday. Bashed me with a hammer, chased me to the lake, drove off with the kid. I'm sorry, I'm not making myself clear. I'm not talking about what Mannix did to you yesterday. I'm talking about 1996. I'm talking about when he kidnapped you. Hutter, Vic felt, was a thorough woman, patient and sensible. She was, in her patient, sensible, thorough way, looking toward the conclusion that Vic was deluded about Charlie Mannix. But if she didn't believe that Wayne had been taken by Mannix, then what did she think had happened? Vic had an awareness of threat she couldn't quite isolate. It was like driving and suddenly knowing there was black ice under the tires and that any sudden movement might send the car spinning out of control. I don't doubt someone fought you, Hunter had said. I don't think anyone doubts that. And you spent a month in a Colorado mental hospital where you were diagnosed with severe PTSD and schizophrenia. Sitting at the table with her coffee in a state of relative quiet and stillness, Vic put it together at last. When it came to her, she felt a cool, dry sensation on the nape of her neck, a prickling across her scalp, the physical indicators of both wonder and horror. She was conscious of feeling both in equal measure. She swallowed some warm coffee to drive away the sick chill and its corresponding sensation of alarm. She made an effort to remain perfectly composed, going over it in her mind. So, Hutter thought Vic had killed Wayne herself in a psychotic fit, killed the dog, and then drowned Wayne in the lake. They only had her word that someone had fired a gun. No one had found so much as a single bullet, not a single casing. The lead had gone into the water, and the brass had stayed in the gun. The fence was smashed and the yard torn up, the only part of her story they couldn't figure out yet. Sooner or later, they'd come up with an explanation for that, too. They'd invent something and force it to fit with the other facts. They had her pegged as a Susan Smith, the woman from South Carolina who drowned her children, then told a whopping lie about how they'd been killed by a black man, kept the nation whipped up in a frenzy of racial hysteria for about a week. That was why the networks weren't talking about Mannix. The police didn't believe in him. They didn't even believe that a kidnapping had occurred at all, but were going along with that part of it for now, probably to cover themselves legally. Vic swallowed the last of her coffee, put the cup in the sink, and stepped out the back door. She had the backyard to herself. She walked through the dew-cool grass to the carriage house and looked through the window. Lou was asleep on the floor beside the motorcycle. The bike was in pieces, side covers off, chain hanging loose. Lou had a canvas tarp folded under his head as a makeshift pillow. His hands were covered in grease. There were black fingerprints on his cheek where he had touched his face in sleep. He's been working in there all night, said a voice from behind her. Daltrey had followed her out onto the lawn. His mouth was open and a grin to show a gold tooth. He had a cigarette in one hand. I've seen it, plenty of times, is how people react when they feel helpless. You wouldn't believe how many women will knit while they're waiting in the emergency room to see if their kid is going to make it through life-saving surgery. When you feel helpless, you'll do just about any old thing to shut it off your head. Yeah, Vic said. That's right. He's a mechanic. It's what he's got instead of knitting. Can I have a cigarette? She thought it might steady her, smooth out her nerves. I didn't see any ashtrays in the house, he said. He pulled a package of Marlboros from his crummy coat, shook one out for her. I quit for my son, she said. He nodded, didn't reply to that. He came up with a lighter, a big brass Zippo, with a cartoon of some kind stamped on the side. He flicked the starter, and it made crunchy noises and spit sparks. Almost out of fuel, he said. She took it from him and gave it a flick, and a little yellow flame wavered from the tip. She lit her smoke and shut her eyes and inhaled. It was like sliding into a warm bath. She looked up, sighing, and considered the cartoon on the side of the lighter. Popeye threw a punch. Kablooey, it said in a burst of yellow shock waves. You know what surprises me? He asked when she pulled another long drag off the cigarette and filled her lungs with sweet smoke. That no one has seen your big old Rolls Royce. How does a car like that escape notice? Is what I wonder. Ain't she surprised no one has seen it? He watched her with bright, almost happy eyes. No, she said, and it was the truth. No, Daltrey repeated. You aren't. Why is that, you think? Because Mannix is good at not being seen. Daltrey turned his head and gazed out at the water. It's something. 2 men in a 1938 Rolls-Royce Wraith. I checked an online database. You know there are fewer than 400 Rolls-Royce Wraiths left in the entire world? There's fewer than 100 in the whole country. That's a rare goddamn car. And the only person to see him is you. You must feel like you're going crazy. I'm not crazy, Vic said. I'm scared. There's a difference. I'd guess you know, Daltrey said. He dropped a cigarette in the grass and ground it out with his toe. He had disappeared back inside the house before Vic realized she was still holding his lighter.